All right, hello, this is Miss Amber, and today I'm going to teach you how to make chocolate chip cookies using a standardized recipe. The first thing that we're going to go over are the tools that you need to make this recipe. You should have the recipe in front of you, and the tools are in a box at the very top. The first thing that you're going to need is an electric mixer. We have KitchenAids here, so I'm going off of the things that we have here at Kentridge. I specified an electric mixer with a paddle attachment. So if you have a KitchenAid at home, this is the attachment that you're going to want to make these cookies with. The next tools that it talks about are measuring equipment. So you're going to need microwave safe liquid measuring cups. You're going to need dry measuring cups to measure your ingredients, and measuring spoons. Measuring spoons aren't considered liquid or dry because you measure both types of ingredients with them. All right, so then we're gonna need a sheet pan. A sheet pan is also known as a cookie sheet to a lot of people. On top of that sheet pan, we're gonna put a piece of parchment paper. Note that it is slightly different than wax paper. It's not gonna leave a waxy residue on your cookies. It's not going to allow the cookies to burn to the pan, so you don't have to oil it or anything, and it's gonna make cleanup nice and easy. The next thing that you need is 4 metal butter knives. These butter knives are to help anchor the parchment paper into the corners. We use a convection oven here at Kentridge High School, which means that there is a fan in the back of the oven, which oftentimes makes the parchment paper blow around. So if it's not anchored, you're gonna end up with a cookie that's misshapen or it looks kind of funny. It's not gonna cook the same. Then we're gonna need a medium cookie scoop, a damp skid pad, cutting board, bench scraper, and metal spatula. I'm gonna set the cookie sheet in nice and parchment to the side because I don't need it for a little bit. So our medium cookie scoop is about 2 tablespoons, maybe a little bit bigger. This makes the perfect size chocolate chip cookie in my opinion. We have a skid pad, which is just wet paper towels that I got wet under the sink and squoze it really hard, get most of the water out. This is going to help anchor the cutting board when we are using the bench scraper to cut our butter so it doesn't slip all over the place. So my cutting board goes on top of that. I have a bench scraper. Oftentimes in culinary or in the kitchen, a tabletop is known as a bench, hence where it gets its name. It's just a flat little cutting tool used to cut doughs or butter, anything that you don't need to put a lot of work into. A metal spatula. Oftentimes we think of the spatula that you might flip eggs with as the only type of spatula. That would be considered an offset spatula because it has a little bit of an angle to it. This tool right here is also known as a spatula. We're going to use this later on when we are portioning our cookies. Since I've already gone ahead and mise en place all my ingredients, the only tools that I technically need right now are my paddle, rubber scraper, a tablespoon to mix the water in later. I'm going to need my portion scoop at a later time, and my metal spatula. So I'm going to set these tools aside. The next thing we're going to talk about are the ingredients. I've gone ahead, like I said, I've already measured them out. I have my mise en place, and I put it actually in order in the way that I'm going to use them. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what the mise en place looks like. It's kind of hard to see from these angles on the camera, but I have half a cup of butter pulled out of the fridge. It's still pretty chilly and solid. I'm going to show you how we're going to soften it up. The recipe calls for half a cup of softened butter. Next I have half a cup each of brown sugar and white sugar. Kind of hard to see here, but if you can see into these bowls, my brown sugar looks to be like it's formed into a puck. The recipe calls for half a cup of packed brown sugar. So as I was measuring this, I pressed it into that cup really, really well, leveled it off, and when I popped it out, it was able to form into the same shape as that measuring cup. Sugar, because it doesn't have much moisture in it or other ingredients, it's not going to form that puck. So I'm going to scoop into my pot of sugar or my bucket of sugar. I'm going to dump it into my measuring cup and then level it off to get a nice consistent measurement. Our next ingredient is an egg, just one single egg. I always make sure to carry my egg from the refrigerator to my station in a cup. If I just set this on the table, it's gonna roll, and the chances of it rolling off the table and being wasted is likely. So bring a cup over. I'll show you there's another reason for this pretty soon. I have 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract using my measuring spoons. I have half a teaspoon of baking soda. The recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of warm water. I've gone ahead and in my microwave safe liquid measuring cup, put way more than I need of the water in here, and I've gone ahead and microwaved it already. If I were to only microwave 1 tablespoon of water, by the time it came out, I wouldn't have a tablespoon left because of the evaporation that would happen. So I'll show you what we're gonna do with this in a moment. Next, we have salt, and the measurement is 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Flour, again, I'm gonna dip into my bucket of flour, pour it into my measuring cup, overfill it, and then level it off. And I have 1½ cups of flour. Then I have 1 cup of chocolate chips, same thing. I'm gonna scoop, pour it into my measuring cup, and kind of level it off, maybe shake it a little bit. It's a little bit harder to be super precise with chocolate chips. So those are the ingredients that we're going to need. Again, all of those ingredients are found on your recipe, so you can reflect back to that if you need to at a later date. Okay, so we're gonna start hitting some of the vocabulary as I start making these cookies. The first thing that we're gonna talk about is preheating the oven. Our oven is located over on the other side of the classroom, so I can't quite show you how to preheat or what we're gonna do. But essentially what it means is we're gonna turn the oven on and make sure that it is at the temperature that our cookies are gonna bake at, and that it has time to heat up to that temperature prior to sticking our portion cookies into the oven. If we don't preheat the oven, our cookies are gonna start cooking at a lower temperature, which means it's gonna start melting the butter, the sugars, the flour, everything in that cookie aren't gonna start doing what they're supposed to do until it reaches that higher temperature, making the consistency of the cookie a little bit weird. So make sure that you always preheat your oven before any recipe that you make. Okay, so that's already done. Our culinary classroom, since we have those convection ovens, we're gonna set it to 25 degrees less than the recipe calls for. So our recipe says to preheat to 350, but I'm gonna go ahead and preheat it to 325. Step number 2 says to cream the butter, white sugar, brown sugar until soft and smooth. So in order to cream our butter, this is one of our vocabulary words, and our sugars together, what I'm gonna start off doing, because this is pretty solid, is I'm gonna use my cutting board, not just a tabletop, and I'm going to use my bench scraper to cut this into smaller pieces. Doesn't have to be super small, but I don't want a big chunk of butter in there. If I put a big chunk of butter in there, all it's gonna do is spin around the bowl, and it's gonna take a longer time to cream the butter and sugar together. Creaming the butter and sugar together means that I want to make it soft, smooth, spreadable. There's no lumps, bumps, chunks. And if I were to dip in here with my spatula, I could spread it very easily on a piece of toast or something. Again, it's smooth, it's soft, it's fluffy. and it's very pale yellow. So we're gonna do that, but before we do, let's talk about a safety feature. We're gonna talk about this mixer. As you can see, I already plugged it in. One of the safety things that you should do before you ever plug a mixer in is check that it is turned off. I did confirm that before I plugged it in. Now that it's plugged in, I know that it's turned off, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to put my paddle attachment on, making sure that it is nice and secure. As I turn this on, I'm never going to put my hands inside the mixer, obviously, and I'm never going to use any of the tools while the mixer is turned on either. It is also very important that if you are going to turn this mixer on, you ensure that it is raised up and in the right position for mixing. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and lower this so I can add my ingredients, which are the butter and the sugars, so I can cream them together. I hope you notice that as I go along, I'm always trying to clean up my station and get rid of things that I don't need, get them out of my way so I have a nice work area. I'm going to keep this nearby because I'm going to eventually use my rubber scraper to push down the butter and the sugars on the sides. The creaming process does take the most time because I have to make sure that it gets nice, soft, and spreadable. I'm going to start off by turning my mixer on at a low speed. If I put it on at high speed to begin, it's going to shoot all that butter and sugar everywhere and create a huge mess. So I'm going to start off with speed number 1. And as I see that things are starting to incorporate, I'm going to speed up the mixer as I go. I'm going one speed at a time. Okay, so I'm going to turn my mixer off, I'm going to lower the bowl, and then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape down the sides. Scraping down the sides means that I'm going to push all the ingredients that have stuck to the side of the bowl because of that fat. I'm going to scrape them down into the inside of the bowl. Also making sure that I get the bottom of the bowl so all of these ingredients can be incorporated very easily and I don't have anything stranded on the sides. My butter and sugars look nice and fluffy. They seem to be creamed together pretty well. Next thing we're gonna do is we are going to beat in the eggs and stir in the vanilla. This brings me to the topic of food safety. So on your on your safety notes, there's a part about ingredient safety. As we've learned in class previously, eggs are a potentially hazardous food, and they have the chance of spreading salmonella if they're not used properly or cleaned up. So you could do one of two things. Obviously, it's always great to have a sanitation solution or a rag near you so you can wipe down your areas and make sure that you're not going to take your salmonella from one place to the other. Hopefully we don't get salmonella, but this way it's easy to wipe down your station. Or another really great idea is to just crack your egg over a surface that you're no longer going to need to use, and you can wash it right away. As I said, we were going to use this little bowl later. We never ever want to crack our egg directly into our finished product. The reason why is sometimes eggs have little blood spots in them, or they might have a shell that gets into your product, and it's really hard to pick it out from there. If I crack my egg directly into this bowl, I can check to see if there's any of those blood spots or shells. I can pick the shells out with my finger, throw them away, or I could just throw the egg away if there is one of those little blood spots. To crack your egg, you're simply going to hit it on the side of your bowl. Throw your shell directly in the garbage. I'm going to change my gloves because they now are contaminated with raw egg. And honestly, you don't have to wear gloves at this point in the mixing process. I just choose to because I don't like the feel of butter on my hands or raw eggs. So that is why I'm wearing gloves. You only have to wear gloves when it is a finished, ready-to-eat cookie. All right, so I'm gonna mix my egg in, and it says to beat the egg, then stir in the vanilla. One of our vocabulary words is beat. What it means to beat is to mix your ingredients together at a vigorous speed to incorporate air and hopefully make it nice and fluffy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off on that lower speed to make sure that my ingredients are incorporating, and then I'm going to speed up my mixer to where it's going pretty fast and it's whipping it pretty hard. This way I'm incorporating that air. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to scrape down the sides here in a moment, and then I'm going to add my vanilla and I'm going to stir it, which leads us to our next vocabulary word, stir. So stirring can typically be done by hand. It's not a super fast motion. It's just incorporating the ingredients lightly. You're not adding any air in while you're stirring. To stir with the mixer, we're going to just add the vanilla in and we're going to put it on a lower speed. Before I go very much further and add the vanilla in, I want you to see what your mixture should look like. It's nice and pale, brownish yellow. It's smooth. There's no lumps or bumps inside of it. The egg is fully incorporated, which means that you can't see any of the residue of the eggs, any of the egg ingredient. It looks consistently like one ingredient. So now I'm going to add this back onto my mixer, and I'm going to stir in the vanilla. While this is stirring in, I'm going to run these dishes over to our dish sink so I can get them washed. the mixer one time just to make sure that we're getting all those ingredients incorporated together. Knowing that I have raw egg on the spatula now, I'm not just gonna set it on my table. That would mean that I have to wipe down my whole entire table to make sure that I'm not spreading that raw egg everywhere. So I'm gonna put it on my cutting board. I don't need that cutting board. I'm not gonna serve raw cookies off of it. But just so it can sit there and keep things nice and clean. Okay, so our next direction says, dissolve baking soda in the hot water. Make sure you only use 1 tablespoon of water. Oftentimes in class, I've seen a lot of students, they go and they measure way more water than they need, like I've already discussed. They heat it up, and then they come over with their baking soda, and they dump their baking soda directly into all this water. And then they scoop 1 tablespoon and add it in. This isn't gonna work because you're not gonna get all that baking soda that settles in at the bottom. The way that we're going to do this instead is we're gonna take our hot water out of our cup that we microwaved. We're gonna use our liquid measuring spoon, our standard measuring spoon. And we're gonna dip in, get 1 full tablespoon and put it into our baking soda. What it means to dissolve means that you're adding a solid to a liquid and you're stirring it up to create a solution. So all of that baking soda is then going to be suspended in the water. You're not going to see any of the baking soda pieces at the bottom. It's not going to look muddy at the bottom. It's going to look kind of like murky or milky water. So I'm going to give this a stir. This baking soda and water method is going to help the cookies stay nice and fat. It's going to make sure that when I bake them, that they don't spread out into each other. Instead, I'm going to have a nice little poofy cookie. I know I'm going to need my salt too. So it says add the baking soda water mixture and salt and then stir. So I'm going to make sure that I stir this all up. Dumping it into my butter, brown sugar, and egg and vanilla mixture. Making sure that I get all of that baking soda at the bottom. I'm going to sprinkle my salt in, and I'm going to sprinkle my salt in all around the mixing bowl, just so it's not settled all in one place. And again, I'm going to stir this up to make it look consistent, all like one ingredient. And I scrape down the sides one more time. Give it a really twirly gumdrop, stir it up one more time. All right, so our next line of the recipe says, stir the flour half at a time until fully incorporated. Let's talk about what it means to fully incorporate. We've already mentioned this a little bit, but my flour is pretty powdery. I don't want to see any of this powdery flour anywhere in my mixture. I want to make sure that it is moistened with all of my liquids and my butters in here and sugars. And so everything is going to look exactly the same. It's going to be pale brown, and it's going to look like the consistency of Play-Doh and or cookie dough. Go figure, right? So I'm going to add approximately half. It doesn't have to be measured because we're going to end up adding all of the flour. I don't want to over mix this flour because I don't want a tough cookie. If I overmix it, my gluten is going to start to develop within this flour, and it's going to make it nice and like hard. We don't want that. We want a nice, soft, tender cookie. So I'm just going to mix it until it incorporates, add the second amount of flour, or the second half of flour, and then mix it just until it's incorporated. So again, approximately half. Starting my mixer on low to make sure that I don't floof flour everywhere. Turn up the mixer to a little bit higher of a speed. I'm gonna lower my mixer, scrape down the sides. Second half of flour and do the same thing. All right, our flour looks like it is completely incorporated. While that was mixing, I went over and I made a bleach bucket for safety reasons, so I can wipe down my station completely after I'm done making these cookies. I'm not only gonna wipe down my station, but I'm gonna wipe down the mixer too. Knowing that there's raw eggs in this, I don't wanna get anybody sick when they use this mixer in the future, or the next person who's using this station. I don't want them to have to clean up my mess. So it's important, make sure you wipe down everything. The solution that I'm going to use consists of 1 gallon of room temperature water and 1 teaspoon of bleach. I'm going to mix that up. I'm gonna grab a rag of some sort, dip it in the solution, wring it out really, really well, and just wipe over my surface. Okay, so the next thing that we're gonna do is we're going to add the chocolate chip cookies and stir on low speed just until incorporated. We don't wanna mix this at too high of a speed or for too long. If we do, the chocolate chips are gonna start to break and you're gonna have a totally different chocolate chip. It's not gonna look like that delicious traditional chocolate chip that we've had. So I'm gonna add these in, and what I'm looking for when these are completely mixed in is that when I scoop it, every single chocolate chip cookie is going to have a couple of those chocolate chips in. So I'm gonna raise up, I'm gonna turn it on low speed. I'm gonna scrape down the sides because it's starting to stick to my paddle, and let it mix for just a couple more seconds. Again, not too long. Don't want those chips to be broken up. Okay, these look great. Our next step is I'm gonna unplug my mixer. I'm going to lower the bowl, detach the paddle attachment, and this is what my cookie dough looks like. Okay, many of us grew up in homes where whoever was helping us make cookies said, "Who wants to lick the paddle or the beater?" It's really not a good idea in this day and age. Again, back to some of those ingredient safety. We don't want to eat raw flour. There's a chance that the raw flour could contain E. coli or other things that just aren't really great for you. So you don't want to eat the raw flour. Also, it has raw egg in it. Many people will say, well, I've never got sick from it before, or how can I eat raw cookie dough when they sell it, or they sell it at the store as raw cookie dough. A lot of the store-bought cookie dough has pasteurized eggs in it, and they use ingredients, it's been tested, and it says that it's safe to eat. So I would trust that, but for the ingredients that you're putting together, please don't eat the raw cookie dough. It's just, in my opinion, not a great idea. So I'm scraping down the sides, making sure that I'm getting any of those chocolate chips at the bottom incorporated in my dough. And then I'm gonna set this aside. And I'm gonna start scooping my cookies onto my sheet pan. So I'm gonna need my medium cookie scoop that we talked about earlier and my metal spatula. This way I'm gonna be able to make a nice, consistent, perfect size cookie. I've already gone ahead and anchored the four corners of my parchment paper down with those butter knives to my sheet pan. And I'm going to talk about the stagger method. So as I'm scooping my cookies, I'm going to stagger them so they're not right next to each other. This way, when they do expand during the baking process, they don't bake into each other. They have a lot of room. So the way that I'm going to use the stagger method is I'm going to do a row of 3 cookies, and then a row of 2 cookies, a row of 3 cookies, a row of 2 cookies, and hopefully I'll have another row that I can do at the end. This recipe does make approximately 12 cookies. So as I'm scooping, I'm leveling off the scoop on the side of the bowl, and I'm using my metal spatula to get any of the residual cookie dough off the side. And I'm gonna plop it. I wanna make sure that I don't plop it too close to those butter knives, because if I do, it will bake into the butter knife, and again, having a weird shaped cookie. So again, stagger method, 3, and then we're gonna go with 2. As I'm scooping, I'm noticing that my cookie dough looks 100% all the same color. There's no butter chunks in there. There's no brown sugar chunks. Everything is fully incorporated. So oftentimes when we bake at home, we don't worry about consistency that much. But what can happen if we don't have a consistent scoop? Well, we put it in the oven, we bake it, we have one really big cookie, and then we have a small cookie. That small cookie is gonna bake much faster. So you might pull out the cookie sheet and go, yep, this cookie is perfect. But that good cookie is gonna need a lot more time to make sure that it is cooked all the way through. So when you have consistent sized cookies, the baking time and temperature should always be about the same. It's really hard to take cookies off a sheet pan when you have ones that still need to cook on that same pan. I'm trying to get as much cookie dough out of this batch as I can. And it looks like I'm actually only going to get 11 cookies, which is weird because the last couple batches that I made yesterday, both should make 14 cookies. So the difference between this could be the size of the egg, it could be how the flour was measured, there could be a couple different things that happen. Most of the time it's the size of the egg. Maybe I can get one more. I don't want to waste anything. The only thing with this cookie is there's not very much chocolate chips on this because it was all on the sides. Okay, so again, I'm going to set this aside. Next thing we're going to talk about is the oven safety. Ovens, obviously, it's preheated. We know that the inside of it is going to be 350 degrees, or in this case, 325 degrees, which is super hot. It could burn you. It could cause a blister if you were to touch anything on the inside of that oven right now. So again, in the classroom, it's really important to be communicative when you are opening up those oven doors. I request that my students in the classroom always say hot doors as they're opening them up. Before they open them and say hot doors, it's required that they look around their surroundings to make sure that nobody's coming at them. As they're opening them, hot doors. Also, these oven doors over here, they open like a barn, or I don't know how to explain it. They open like this, basically. It's not a drop-down oven. No matter what kind of oven you have, you want to open it up all the way. If you open it up only part way, it's going to be harder to get your cookie sheet into the oven. And you don't want to be fumbling around with things, especially with a really, really hot oven. So, hot doors, open your oven all the way up. You don't have to wear hot pads as you're putting your cookie sheet into the oven because it's cool. But as you're putting it in, be very aware of what you're doing and make sure that you don't touch any of the stuff in the oven. We're going to close the doors. We're going to set the timer for 7 minutes. This recipe says to bake for about 10 minutes in the preheated oven or until edges are golden brown. So it's always a good idea, if a recipe says to bake something for 10 minutes, to start off with a lesser amount of time. This way you can check it at, in this case, the 7-minute mark. Make sure that it doesn't need to be cooked any longer, or if it does need to be cooked longer, you can always set the timer for more. You can't take away the cooking process from that 10 minutes. You can't take away what you've already done. So set it for less time, check it, and see if it's good. Before I put these in the oven, I'm also going to talk about, because you can't see over there, I'm going to talk about removing cookies from the oven. We're going to pretend that this cookie sheet has been in the oven, my cookies are cooked, they're beautiful, they're golden brown, and I'm ready to take them out. Again, as I'm removing them, I'm going to look around, make sure nobody's around me. I'm going to say hot doors as I'm opening the oven, but I'm also going to make sure that I have hot pads or oven mitts. I'm not just going to have one, because if I have one oven mitt and I try and grab in the middle, it's really awkward. This is a super heavy cookie sheet for one hand. If somebody were to come around me and I fumbled, I might try to catch it. I don't want to burn this hand with a 350-degree pan. So we're always going to use two hands. And as we remove it from the oven, we're going to make sure that we already have a space cleared behind us that does not have something that will melt or burn. And I'm going to say hot pan as I take it out, and I'm going to put it to where it needs to go, turn back around, and close my oven doors. This goes for all the way opening up and closing, for taking your cookies out and putting them in. At this point, I think that we've covered everything. We talked about preheating the oven, how to cream your butter and sugar, what it means to scrape down the sides, what it means to stir, dissolve, fully incorporate your ingredients, and the stagger method, along with the safety that goes along with the mixer, the different types of ingredients, oven, and removing your pan from the oven. If you have any questions, please make sure you're emailing me asking before you just turn in your notes incomplete. Thank you so much. Have a great day.